Today, the country's most trusted official on the pandemic gave the sharpest warning yet about where things could be headed. And whether he intended it that way or not, what Dr. Anthony Fauci told a Senate committee today was also a stark indictment of how we got here.
Based on what you're seeing now, how many COVID-19 deaths and infections should America expect before this is all over?
I can't make an accurate prediction, but it is going to be very disturbing. I will guarantee you that, because when you have an outbreak in one part of the country, even though in other parts of the country they're doing well, they are vulnerable. I made that point very clearly last week at a press conference. We can't just focus on those areas that are having the surge. It puts the entire country at risk. We are now having 40,000+ new cases a day. I would not be surprised if we go up to 100,000 a day if this does not turn around. I think it's important to tell you and the American public that I'm very concerned because it could get very bad.
100,000 new cases a day. That's the equivalent of the entire population of Manchester, New Hampshire, Pompano Beach, Florida, or Boulder, Colorado becoming infected with coronavirus every single day. For perspective, here's the European Union, roughly comparable to the U.S. in population. Right now, the European Union is averaging less than 5,000 new cases a day. And even at its peak, even at the worst point of the outbreak, the number stayed under 30,000. That was back in March. Today, heading into July, after months of what the vice president likes to call a whole-of-government effort, Dr. Fauci is warning that we all could soon be living in a country with more than triple the worst that they ever saw in Europe, and 2.5 times the all-time high numbers we're seeing right now. 40,000 new cases a day right now. That's 10,000 a day more than before states began reopening. It's also far above the kind of containment level where experts say that contact tracing even makes sense anymore. We've blown past that. A senior CDC official telling the Journal of the American Medical Association, I quote, "We have way too much virus across the country for that right now," which is why this country is now a pariah state. Starting tomorrow, European Union countries will reopen travel from 14 countries, including Canada, Montenegro, Rwanda, and Central Africa, but not the U.S., the world leader for decades in the study of prevention of infectious disease, the biggest economy in the world, the only country to send people to the moon, and we can't even fly to Paris because Americans are now a health hazard. So much for the so-called whole-of-government approach that Vice President Pence keeps going on about. I mean, let's be honest, it's not been a whole-of-government approach, because whole of government means the federal government. It's been a good luck you're on your own. That's the approach this administration decided to take when they left it to the states. Remember the president talking about this being a war against an invisible enemy? I mean, if this country was actually invaded by an enemy force and the president left its defense up to individual states the way he did with coronavirus, that president would be forced to resign. Things are now so bad that states in the Northeast, which got hit so hard and made so many sacrifices to contain the outbreak, they have now tightened restrictions on people coming in from other parts of the country. And 17 states nationwide are starting to close back up. That, too, is a result of the federal government's lack of a coherent federal response. All of government response, please. It's every region, every state, every locality for itself, or every individual. Absent months of nationwide, federally organized testing, tracing, containment, changing individual behavior in the form of mask wearing, it's now become a weapon of last resort.
It is critical that we all take the personal responsibility to slow the transmission of COVID-19 and embrace the universal use of face coverings.
There's no doubt that wearing masks protects you and gets you to be protected.
We need to support mask wearing. When I'm not in uniform, I wear them. They're white. They work very effective, and I think they're a great investment for the American people.
It is not an inconvenience. It is not a suppression of your freedom.
When you're outside and not have the capability of maintaining distance, you should wear a mask at all times.
This face covering actually is an instrument of freedom for Americans if we all use it.
Wear facial coverings where social distancing is not possible.
Please, 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 wear a face covering when you go out in public.
That's the Surgeon General of the United States literally begging Americans to wear a mask. That's where we are. So where's the President of the United States, and why isn't he leading the way on mask wearing? You can see all the officials you want pleading with people to wear a mask. The President of the United States is the most powerful person in the world. He led the way on reopening, but he's been subverting the idea of wearing masks from the moment he announced it. I mean, remember at the same time as he announced the task force recommendation about mask wearing, he kept pointing out it was voluntary, just a suggestion really. And he crowed about how he wouldn't wear a mask because it was, so unbecoming. Essentially, he could protect his vanity by not wearing a mask. But an actual mask, that would protect other people? No, that was beyond the pale. Here's Republican Senator Lamar Alexander, chairman of the committee that heard Dr. Fauci's testimony today, imploring people to take the politics out of the equation.
Which is why I think it's so important that we get over this pro-Trump, anti-Trump mask debate. I mean, where people say, well, if I'm for the president, I'll not wear a mask. If I'm against the president, I will, which is why I've suggested that occasionally the president might want to wear a mask just to signal to people that he thinks it's important.
Wow, that's a bold statement. The president, he might want to, he might want to just occasionally, if that's not too hard, just to signal to people, Leave aside for a moment that this is a ridiculously low bar, suggesting the president occasionally might want to signal that he thinks mask wearing is important. Leave aside that in the middle of a pandemic that's killed 126,000 Americans, this is the best a retiring senator can manage. Chairman Alexander's statement does raise the right question. Namely, what does the president think is important? Statues of dead people, for one. Take a look. The president spent part of the weekend sending out tweet after tweet of photos of people allegedly defacing statues, one after the other, like a guy bum rushing the post office, papering the walls with wanted posters, leading CNN political analyst and New York Times White House correspondent Maggie Haberman to post this, writing, the president's Twitter feed feels like he's producing a crime show while much of the rest of the country is having a very different conversation. A more relevant conversation to millions of Americans concerned about whether they might catch a deadly disease, or their moms might, or their dads, or their grandparents, or their children, which any other president, Republican or Democrat, would be focused intensely, if not obsessively, on. Instead, just a couple hours before Dr. Fauci gave his chilling testimony, today the president was tweeting this. We are tracking down the two anarchists who threw paint on the magnificent George Washington statue in Manhattan. We have them on tape. They will be prosecuted and face 10 years in prison based on the Monuments and Statues Act. Turn yourselves in now. That is where the president's head is, on catching a pair of vandals who threw paint on a statue in New York, a couple blocks from my house, when he could be using that platform to save tens or even hundreds of thousands of lives. The tweet might read, we are all Americans, and Americans look out for each other. Please wear a mask. He might even do what Dick Cheney recently did and include a photo of himself wearing one. He might also tell his vice president to do the same, without adding that, the thing he always does about if state and local officials require it. But keeping him honest, let's get real. Let's play you the clip that illustrates the president's vanity about mask wearing that I mentioned a moment ago, because this is what he has always believed on the subject.
Well, I just don't want to wear one myself. It's a recommendation. They recommend it. I'm feeling good. I just don't want to be doing, I don't know, somehow sitting in the Oval Office behind that beautiful Resolute desk. The great Resolute desk. I think wearing a face mask as I greet presidents, prime ministers, dictators, kings, queens, I don't know, somehow I don't see it for myself. I just maybe I'll change my mind, but this will pass, and hopefully it'll pass very quickly.
He sprays a mask on his face every day for vanity, but an actual mask that would protect other people, that he just can't do.